Well, hello. I thought today we would have a quick conversation about the Underground Railroad and perhaps a segment of it that you haven't heard of. So, we traditionally think of the Underground Railroad running from south to north. The Underground Railroad, which is a system of people and places and resources and allies, all helping enslaved persons get across the Mason-Dixon line, which was the border between Pennsylvania and Maryland, at least in one region of the country, between Ohio and Kentucky in another part, et cetera, and so on. And that's true. But the Underground Railroad is, in fact, the first civil rights movement in this country. And it is a loose network of people, places, and resources that existed all throughout the states. Now, it was regional. And in other words, depending on where you were, the method of escape could be vastly different. What you did to get away from Tennessee through Kentucky up into Ohio would be different from what you did to get out of Virginia into Maryland and then into Pennsylvania. So most times, enslaved persons will be looking to travel north unless you were way down south. And for this video, I want to take us on a virtual trip. Normally, we do our videos on site, but because we're going so far away, I have to take you virtually to where we need to be. Here we see the United States depicted with the states that had slavery in gray and the states that didn't in blue. And then you have states that are white, which are territories to the west, which probably wouldn't be the best route to take for an enslaved person trying to escape. But if you lived down here, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, South Carolina, the route north might not be the most optimal way for you. You might want to go into what we know today as Florida, which was then Spanish territory. And that is exactly what many enslaved persons did. The Yamasee Indians of Georgia and the Seminole Indians of Florida, the Cherokee, the Shinnecock, and the Tuscarora all would provide resources, comfort, aid, and assistance to escaping enslaved persons as far back as 1688. You might argue that this southern route to freedom was the first instantiation of the Underground Railroad. Thinking of the Underground Railroad as a system that crisscrossed all of enslaved states, it could have many branches going in many directions. Well, this branch went south into Spanish territory. What we know today is Florida. Now, why would the Indians do this? They didn't like the English either. They didn't like that they had come in to their country. They didn't like that they had taken over their lands. They didn't like that they had displaced them from some of their sacred homelands and places. And escaping enslaved persons would know plantations, they would know locations, they would know resources, they knew white ways. They could help the Native Americans in their quest to regain their lands. They could help them in a manner of being able to harass the English settlers that had taken over their lands. Additionally, Charles II, who was the King of Spain, when he heard of these enslaved persons making their way south with the aid of the Native Americans who knew the hunting trails up and down in the Spanish territory, which is now Florida, he made a decree that all enslaved persons who made it to St. Augustine, would they convert to Catholicism and be baptized and take on a Christian name, they would be made a citizen of Spain. They would be given land and rights, just like any other citizen, and they would be expected to serve in the militia. Now, he was hedging his bets that these newly freed men would form a militia to protect St. Augustine. St. Augustine being probably one of the first missions in America and arguably one of the oldest ones. And he now was forming a protective force for St. Augustine. And I don't think that any enslaved man had a problem with that, given that he would be given rights and privileges far above and beyond what he could ever have imagined or hoped for. So Charles II of Spain was extending an olive leaf and also drawing more enslaved persons off Carolina plantations and buffering the security of St. Augustine as well. So many enslaved people made this journey that eventually they were able to form the first legally sanctioned by the Spanish government, the first legally sanctioned community for Blacks in North America, because it wasn't America, because Florida wasn't part of America yet, called in Spanish, Gracia Real de Santa Teresa de Mose. On English maps, or in English, simply Fort Mose. So these former enslaved persons form a community. They are able to marry, have children, have families. They don't have to worry about their families being split up, being decimated. They farm the land, they tend the land, and of course, they are the standing militia for St. Augustine. Around 1740, Fort Mose is attacked by the British. There is a fight, a skirmish, and eventually the fort is overcome and sacked and destroyed. The inhabitants flee to St. Augustine, which is only 2 miles away, and they are able to repel the British from St. Augustine. And then eventually Fort Mose, the second, is rebuilt in 1752. And these free former enslaved persons move back into the fort, which is Fort Mose. Around 1763, Spain cedes the Florida territory to the United States government. That meant that now this former Spanish territory was now under the purview and a part of the United States. That left these formerly enslaved persons in a little bit of a jam, because while they were or are citizens of Spain, they're no longer in Spain. They are in America, and they are in danger of being re-enslaved. So Spain relocates them from Fort Mose, St. Augustine, to Cuba. So now I have to go to Cuba, in this community that is in Cuba, and find these descendants of the residents of Fort Mose. It's just something else on my bucket list I have to do once I retire. But I want to show you the closeness between St. Augustine and Fort Mose. It is, like I said, 2 miles from St. Augustine. So here we see the entire, or almost the entire, continent of North America and a little bit of South America. And as we pull in to Florida, we start to see Jacksonville. Now we see St. Augustine just beneath it. And as we come in a little closer, we see St. Augustine, and here Fort Mose, which is now a historic state park, only 2 miles north and west of the city of St. Augustine. So you see it was in close proximity to the city. And this is where the forts, Fort Mose 1 and Fort Mose 2, was built. Since we cannot go there, or I cannot make this video from there, I will take you there virtually and show you around a little bit of the now historic state park, which is Fort Mose. So here we see the park entrance, which is Fort Mose Historic Park. As you can see, is part of the Florida Park Service, and it is very well done. On site, you will see the original site of Fort Mose 1 and 2. Also, you will see on site the museum, which is very well done, which contains a theater. It contains interactive print and audio displays. Here is the front of it. It's small, but it's very well done, very well put together. I would encourage you, if you find yourselves in the vicinity of St. Augustine, Florida, that it is worth your while. If it's within an hour's drive, it is certainly worth your while to make it over to Fort Mose and see this historic place. Here we see a raised walkway which takes you into the marsh, sawgrass on each side, and there's Florida marsh up under it. So you couldn't walk there if it were not for the raised walkway. It takes you out to the site where the original Fort Mose 1 and 2 were. And here it is. So just beyond the trees that are a couple of football fields away stood Fort Mose 1 and 2. We know from the historical accounts that they were located in this general area, but we know because of the Space Shuttle Atlantis, which took thermal imagery from space of this marsh area, archaeologists were able to find the original footings of Fort Mose 1 and 2. So we hope that one day, when they're able to uncover them and bring them to some place where we can observe them, we'll be able to get even yet closer to this historic location. Inside of the museum, as you can see, my beloved here is taking in some of the literature that is throughout the museum. A wonderful timeline, which will show you from start to finish how Fort Mose came to be, some of the people and places. Inside of the museum, there is audio interactive exhibits so that you can hear in the first person from some of the inhabitants of Fort Mose, because they kept journals, diaries, and they kept immaculate records on who arrived, who was married, who they married, how many children they had, and everything. It is very well preserved, and is one of those little known things about African-American history, that this first legally sanctioned Black community, which was not in America at the time, but was on the continent of North America, and that the first Underground Railroad probably went south and not north. One of the other things that struck me about walking around Fort Mose, the park, and I wondered about the name, and I'm sure it probably has some Spanish etymology, but I thought also that perhaps the Spanish moss, which is everywhere, as you can see here, it is beautiful, and the sun trickles its way down through the tree branches and hits the moss and refracts almost like a reflector. And I wondered if Fort Mose was a Spanish version of moss, because this Spanish moss is, like I said, everywhere. And it's beautiful, absolutely gorgeous. And that's just my opinion. It may or may not be. But as we walked around the site, I just wondered if that were the case. So if you find yourself in the vicinity of St. Augustine, we certainly recommend that you take a look at Fort Mose, the first legally sanctioned Black community on the continent of North America. And as we always say, truth be told, our history can be found anywhere because our history is everywhere. I hope you enjoyed this short virtual visit to Fort Mose.